You're standing at a funeral. Someone hands you a small card. There's a hymn, a few words, a casket lowered into the ground. It feels ancient. It feels like it's always been this way. But the real answer is far stranger. Burying the dead is not something humans invented once and kept forever. It's something your species fought for, lost, rediscovered, and argued about for hundreds of thousands of years. And the way you grieve today carries fingerprints from all of it. Start in a cave in northern Spain, about 50,000 years ago. Researchers working at a site called Cima de los Huesos found something strange. Dozens of bodies, all at the bottom of a deep, vertical shaft, with almost no other animal bones mixed in. Why would that matter? Because in nature, bodies don't end up in one place by accident. Something put them there. Something kept putting them there, again and again. The paleoanthropologist Juan Luis Arzuaga, who has studied the site for decades, has argued this looks less like an accident and more like a pattern. A choice. A place where the dead were taken on purpose by creatures that were not yet what you'd call human. That's the part that should stop you. These weren't Homo sapiens. They were likely Neanderthal ancestors. Long before your species existed, something was already setting the dead apart from the living. Think about what that means. Grief might be older than thought itself. Fast forward to around 100,000 years ago. Now you're in a cave called Kafze, in what is now Israel. A child is buried there, curled on its side, with deer antlers placed carefully against its body. Not thrown in, placed, positioned. Someone made a decision about how this small body should rest. You decode that the moment you see it. A decision implies a mind that understands something has ended and that the ending deserves a response. This is where things get strange in a different way. For a long stretch of prehistory, burial wasn't universal. It came and went. Some groups buried their dead with objects, ochre, flowers, tools. Other groups, sometimes living at the very same time, left bodies exposed or moved them, or did things modern researchers still don't fully understand. There was no single ancient funeral. There were hundreds of competing answers to the same unbearable question. What do you do with a person who is no longer a person? By the time you reach the Upper Paleolithic, around 30,000 years ago, burials become more elaborate, almost theatrical. At Sungir in modern Russia, archaeologists uncovered a grave holding two children, laid head to head, covered in thousands of carefully crafted ivory beads. Each bead would have taken real time to make. Hours, days. Multiply that across thousands of beads, and you're looking at an enormous investment of labor poured into people who would never use any of it. Why spend that much effort on someone who can't feel it? This is the question that the anthropologist Paul Pettit has spent years untangling. His research suggests these elaborate burials weren't really for the dead at all. They were for the living. A funeral wasn't a gift to a corpse. It was a performance, a ritual, a way for a community to look at its own fear and grief and turn it into something with structure, something survivable. That idea sits at the center of almost everything that follows. Grief without ritual is just chaos. Ritual gives chaos a shape you can hold. Now zoom out further. Around 12,000 years ago, something shifts again. Humans start settling down. Farming begins. And suddenly, burial location starts to matter in a new way. At Tel Karmel and other early Neolithic sites in the Near East, archaeologists have found something unsettling by modern standards. Skulls, removed from bodies, plastered over with clay and given facial features. Painted eyes, modeled noses, kept inside the home. Sit with that for a second. Not buried in a separate place. Kept in the house, among the living. The archaeologist Ian Coit has spent years studying these skull removal practices across the early farming villages of the Levant. His work suggests that as communities became more permanent, more tied to specific land, ancestors became tied to that land too. Keeping a skull wasn't about denial. It was about ownership, lineage, belonging. Your ancestors weren't gone. They were still part of the household, still part of the claim a family had to its place in the world. That single idea, that the dead remain socially present, never really leaves human culture. It just changes shape. You can see the same impulse mutate over thousands of years. In ancient Egypt, it becomes mummification, designed to preserve the body so the spirit has somewhere to return to. In ancient Rome, it becomes the household shrine, where ancestors were honored almost like minor deities watching over daily life. In many indigenous cultures across the world, it becomes oral lineage, songs and names passed down so the dead are spoken back into existence generation after generation. Different tools, same instinct. Keep the dead close enough to still matter. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For most of human history, death was not hidden. Bodies were washed by family members, not strangers. They were kept in the home for days. Children saw them, neighbors visited. Death lived inside ordinary life, not outside it. That changed shockingly recently. The medical historian Philippe Ariès, in his influential work on the history of death, argued that it was only in the last 2 centuries, especially with the rise of hospitals and funeral industries in the West, that death became something professionals manage instead of something families witness. Dying moved out of the bedroom and into the hospital ward. The body moved out of the home and into the funeral parlor. For the first time in the species' long history, most people stopped touching death directly. Is that progress? Or is it the first time your species has tried to grieve at arm's length? There's a quieter consequence to all this distance. Psychologists studying modern grief, including work building on the continuing bonds model developed by researchers like Dennis Klass, have found that people often cope best not by moving on, but by maintaining an ongoing relationship with the dead, talking to them, keeping objects, marking anniversaries. In other words, doing, in smaller and more private ways, exactly what that Neolithic household did with a painted skull on a shelf. Keeping the dead socially present, just without the clay. Maybe that instinct never disappeared. Maybe it just lost its rituals and had to invent new, quieter ones. A photo on a nightstand. A voicemail you can't delete. A birthday you still remember even though no one is celebrating it anymore. So think again about that funeral card in your hand. The hymn, the casket. It feels small compared to 50,000 years of antler-covered children and bead-draped skeletons and skulls kept on shelves like family. But it's doing the exact same job those ancient rituals were doing. It's giving your fear a shape. It's turning an ending into something you can survive. You're not just attending a funeral, you're standing at the most recent point in an unbroken line of humans who all face the same impossible question and all answered it the same way. Not by ignoring death, by performing their way through it, together, one ritual at a time. And the real answer to what ancient humans did when someone died isn't really about them at all. It's about you, still doing it right now, every time you choose not to face loss alone.